How you doing? My name is Lu Diaz. I'm a mix engineer from Miami, Florida. I'm here at the awesome Astro Studios in Atlanta. I've worked with artists like Pitbull, DJ Khaled, Morgan Heritage, and many, many, many more. In this video, I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to show you guys a bunch of the mistakes that I made early on in my career that I see a lot of people make as well today that hopefully will help you not make the same mistakes, become a better mixer, give you a leg up, and get you there quicker than I did. One of the first mistakes I made using EQs, I see people still do it to this day, and they take a sweeping EQ to find something that's wrong with a vocal or any sort of like sound. But what they do is they boost a very narrow frequency and they start sweeping. And the thing is, if you boost 6 to 10 dBs, everything's going to sound bad. You're going to find tons of problems with any sound if you're boosting that much. What I learned was to listen first, and then say, okay, I feel this is too boxy sounding, or there's something wrong with the low end there. It's too much. What I use now is a C6 in solo, which is at 0. Nothing's being boosted, just to identify and confirm that what I heard was right. So I'll show you real quick on here. This is a vocal from Jamari from Morgan Heritage.
Like send them love ID, but someone while you're by my side. And we not care what them chat about we, you'll be right here by my side.
So you can hear the vocal right there, how boxy the bottom, and there's too much body on there, around 200, right? So I don't know, is it 200, is it 250, is it? So what I do is I'll show you real quick with the C6, I'll go and play it, and then I'll search for it, which is this band here, and I'm gonna solo and search, but notice I'm not boosting any volume.
Like send them love ID, but someone while you're by my side. And we not care what them chat about we, you'll be right here by my side.
That helped me to confirm that that's where I want the top of my bell to be. You follow me? So now I know that it's 122. I said 200. So that gives me now an area where I'm actually going to boost back. And I'll play for you with Engage now. You can see how much reduction. Although I have two bands there, you'll see what I'm talking about.
Like send them love ID, but someone while you're by my side.
So that corrected that area, obviously overcorrecting a little bit, but I'm just showing you what the plugin does. And what I'm not doing is I'm not chasing my own tail by correcting a bunch of stuff that's just sounds wrong because I'm boosting, 10 dB when I'm sweeping, right? This is a much better approach. Another mistake that I made also as a new mix engineer, and that I see people make today as well, especially when I receive sessions, is this idea of like underusing verbs, using them just stock, in other words. So for example, with a verb, pre-delay is a big deal with verbs. The moment that the voice comes on to the time you hear the verb, that's what we call the pre-delay. The pre-delay is set to 0. That means the verb starts right when your vocal starts. And before, I didn't know that, so I would go on and just throw a bunch of verb on there. And it sounded great at the beginning. But as the mix started getting fuller and fuller and more advanced, then I'd be like, man, the vocal sounds cloudy. And the reason why is because that verb is too close to when the vocal is talking or singing or rapping, whatever. And so the pre-delay shifts that. The amount you do, that's up to you. But what it's doing, it's moving out of the way of the vocal a little bit. So the vocal's transients are there, and then the verb is still there. And I'll show you here. I use the R verb here. And pre-delay, which you'll notice right here, is set to 0. So if I play the vocal, it's just going to play the verb immediately when the vocal starts.
Like send them love ID, but someone while you're by my side.
That sounds fine now, right? Because you're just hearing the vocal and the verb is there. But the thing is, there's no space between the vocal starts and the verb starts. And this pre-delay allows us to delay when the verb will come in as opposed to the vocal. And that helps to sort of move things out of the way. This only has 160 milliseconds, but that's enough to get the verb out of the way. And I'll show it to you real quick. I'm going to throw it all the way up so you can hear it.
Like send them love ID. Like send them love ID.
So those vocal transients sound so much better because the vocals now is not being, clouded by the verb of it. You follow me? So we're pushing it out of the way. And that was something that I learned with time, by just trial and error and making that mistake and trying to figure it out. That's a more pro way of using a reverb. Another thing too is you could do is you can follow the verbs with EQs. Like, in fact, on the R verb here, you already have these dampening tools and EQ tools, and you can see here that I'm pulling back to make it softer sounding. So shaping your reverbs is a good thing. You could delay a verb and give it some really cool, stereo imaging. We can get super advanced. I wasn't utilizing any of that stuff. I would just throw a plate up and that was it. It was a verb, and a lot of people do that. And I think it's important to explore. And this way, you're doing two things. You're creating a better mood, and you're also making room for the vocal to sit in front of you. And the same thing with the delays. Sounds great, but it could also become just too much mud when you have a ping pong or a quarter note delay or even an eighth note delay, too close to the vocal. So what we do a lot of times is we take the high pass filter and roll all the low end off, a low pass filter to get the high end off in order to give it that dreamy feel so that you could put more delay and it not be in the way. There's not too much traffic going on.
Like send them love ID, but someone while you by my side. And we not care what them chat about we. You be right here by my side. Me ready to give you a son or a daughter. Baby, you're my bona fide. Without you, I feel incomplete. So stay right here by my side. Girl, I'll give you everything. Give me the bank account and give you the diamond ring. I saw a king for loving queen. If I'll be a provider, she'll bring me sanity.
As I learned, I'm like, oh, great. I can use this delay much more effectively and louder, actually, without it getting in the way of the vocal. Another mistake that I made at the beginning of my mixed career that I see people make as well is when it comes to session organization, just having some kind of system that makes sense. As you're mixing and you're in a flow, the last thing you want to do is jump around, looking for kicks and snares when you don't know where they are. Having a system really helps you to flow and focus on mixing and not finding. At the beginning, I was around when we went from analog to digital. And in a console, we all had our idea that we would do, at least I'd love to have my drums, all together here, then, bass, pianos, guitars, vocals, however, you have your groups of things. So we tried translating that over to Pro Tools. But what I noticed is, I think, kids that came up and Pro Tools was already a thing, maybe didn't have that thought to do that. And I would get sessions and I'd be like, man, there's like a kick, a stick, a vocal, a hi-hat, a piano, all just everywhere. And then, aux tracks everywhere. And so what it did, I was like, man, this is hard to work this way because you have, it interrupts your workflow. You know what I mean? You're like, oh, I think I need more high end on the snare. And you're like, wait, where's the snare? Where's the snare? You already messed up the whole flow. You know what I mean? And so to me, that's a huge part. So organizing your sessions, not necessarily so everyone else understands what's going on, but that you understand what's going on. My vocals here, they're all color-coded. And I like to do that because even with region groups, I'll do the same thing, or I'll color code stuff. So as I'm getting ideas, I'm jumping around the session really quickly. I'm not having to go, oh, where do I think the kick is? The kick's over here. If it's not going to be right there, it's going to be in this area. And, there it is, number one, or the bass. Oh, I know the bass is going to be over here. In this case, I put it close to the kick because I was working on something, but for the most part, it's after the drums, or an 808 will be next to the kick. And knowing that, having a system that helps you move quicker is just going to make you a better mixer. You know what I mean? So another mistake that I made, which is one of the ones that I remember was a big mistake of mine, was over-processing, over-EQing, over-compressing a kick, for example. I remember the day that it dawned on me was I was working on a record for Inner Circle, the great Inner Circle, over at the legendary studio in Miami, Circle House. And I was mixing a record for them. And back then, a plugin was a piece of rack, a gear, right? So I had a kick. I remember battling for a half hour, an hour. I had, the EQ from the console on, the compressor from the console on. We inserted another compressor. I had all sorts of gear happening on this sound. Long story short, I'm sitting here working and I'm thinking to myself, man, this doesn't work, man. This kick is just not happening. It doesn't feel right. And so I remember playing the record and I thought, you know what? Stop. And I just hit the insert button. I disengage the insert button, disengage the compressor. And the insert button disengaging is just like when you bypass your plugins today, right? Boom, took all the gear I had out of there, muted all the freaking parallels, and just sat back, turned it up a little bit, played it back, and I'm like, man, this sounds perfect. And that was a moment, man. I realized, man, what am I doing? I'm over-processing for, and I played the record again, threw up the fader, I added a little 10K, a little maybe, just like a little low end, like a little tiny bit of 50, and I thought, that feels perfect. And so the valuable lesson that I learned that day I mean, it changed the way I mixed from that point on was that less is more. A lot of times the sound that you have has a lot of good qualities to it, you know? Other than fixing stuff, sometimes it's just throwing it up and being like, you know what, I need to control the bottom end a little bit, and that's about it. And sounds in their natural state tend to sound better. And that actually got me to the point where I am today, where I'm known for that, for the low end and kick, because I started learning how to actually listen, you know what I mean? And not mix with my eyes. Another early mixer mistake that I used to make was with bass. You learn the basics when you start and you start working. And I would boost the low end on the bass. That's it. And then it would be too much and I would compress it and then make up some of that volume. And so what I learned early on was that there's this thing called saturation. And that is your friend when it comes to low end, right? And it actually is your friend when it comes to vocals, to anything. But in the low end specifically, I love it, right? And the reason why is because basically saturation is distortion. And it just gives the bass a fullness that no EQ is going to give you or no compressor is going to give you. So what I learned was, let me saturate it first and give it that sort of first, additive distortion. Then now I can work on it where it's, oh my God, it just sounds bad. Sometimes I don't even have to do anything to it. Just put a little saturation on it and it sounds great. Maybe compression to control it. Let me play this bass, which is a very subby bass. Let me play it for you without it. Right? So let me turn these guys down. I'm going to show you. These two dials are pretty simple. Beauty are the even harmonics and Beast are the odd harmonics. And in some cases, you use one or the other. I like using both, especially on the sound. And you'll see what I'm talking about. Let me play it for you, and I'm going to add it as I go. I'll exaggerate it too so you can really hear it. So I turned it way up there so you can hear it. And I'm going back down to where I'm more than likely going to wind up being. What you'll see is that it gave it this like lift that EQs can't do. Even though it's a sub bass, man, it just gave you that lift. And I still feel it needs more. So I took the REQ, my trusty REQ, and you can see I'm boosting a ton of way down there on the low end. And this is just because I know I have that room for it to live. I'll bypass them and show it to you while it's playing. You can see the lift that the bass gets.
Like send them love ID. I saw me while you're by my side. And we not care what them chat about me. You'll be right here by my side.
So you can see, right? It's just a dramatic change on the low end, right? And you're there to control it. You can't go crazy with these tools, but it shows you immediately that that's much better than just an EQ and a compressor. In fact, I got no compression. I just got the saturator and I'm boosting a ton of EQ. Now, of course, out of the session in my group, I'm going to control it with other compressors generally, but that's a much better way than, pumping low end, then compressing, then pumping low end, You're just on a vicious cycle that's going to get you to basically a big mess. So don't forget, saturation is your friend. Okay, and the last one, which is more of a personal note, is how I used to mix just to impress people, other engineers, label people, and how I changed that and realized that I was mixing for an artist or for a producer, like for the song. When you first start out, you think, oh, I gotta use, I see people pop in tons of plugins and you don't have to process everything, right? Also, it's important to note that when you get a rough mix from somebody or you hear a song, that you think about what the song is about, what the emotion of the demo is about. There's something to be said about over polishing something. It could be a great mix. You actually did a great mix, but the whole vibe of the record is gone, right? And the artist is like, man, they're not happy with it because they're not worried about it sounding pristine. They're worried about the emotion of their art translating over to their audience, you know what I mean? And I learned that over a few sessions and I started realizing, I got to take a step back and realize, like, what am I here to do, right? I'm here to create that vision that the artist and producer have and make it connect with the audience. So sometimes by overly sort of putting your idea of it in front of the vision can sometimes get in the way. It's a great mix, but it just doesn't have the vibe. Sometimes you have to say, you know what, this vocal doesn't sound great, but for this song, it just feels right? Because remember, the listener's not biased by any of this stuff. The listener has no idea what mastering is, mixing is, none of that. They just connect to the artist and they connect to the song. So if you're there and you interfere with that sort of channel, it's happened to me, and I've seen it happen to people where they're like, don't send me the rough. I want to do my own thing. I'm like, send me the rough. Like, that's your best friend. You know why? Because in the rough, there's a lot of information there that the artist, the producer, the label loved enough to say, we're putting money behind there and hiring a guy like me and hiring a mastering engineer. So then you have to respect that and say, okay, I'm going to mix it, but I'm not going to take away the soul that they loved, because then at that point, I'm putting myself in front of the song, and it's not about me. All right, guys, so thank you for hanging with me. Hopefully you guys learned something from all my mistakes. If you got any questions, make sure you drop them down in the comments, and I'll check you guys out next video. Peace.